Lauren, thank you for being here today and talking with us about character. I mean, in these times, there's character is a very important thing that we are thinking about. And to get a chance to get together as a small group and have a conversation is really important. And we appreciate your time. So we talked a little bit and we found this quote from, I think it is Heraclitus of Ephesus from quite some time ago about character. And it says, good character is not formed in a week or a month. It is created little by little, day by day. Protracted and patient effort is needed to develop good character. And so with that, I look forward to talking a little bit about character and about youth. And Lauren, welcome, and tell us about yourself and your plans. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really looking forward to this. These are kind of crazy times that we're living in. And so connection is so key. I am the executive director of Character Counts Midshore, and I know we were just chatting, but we cover Talbot County, Dorchester County, and Caroline counties, and then collaborate with Kent and Queen Anne's County Character Counts. So in all, our organization has about 165 volunteers, and most of them have been here for, 5, 10, 15 years, just a real higher level of commitment. And I can't tell you how much, as I've been digging in, I've been here at Character Count since November. And as I've been digging in and listening to stories, I've heard a lot of stories of kids who started Character Counts in kindergarten and have now graduated and are starting their career. So it's a real legacy that I've come into. And I know we have a longtime Character Counts coach here with us today. It's really meaningful for the kids. That's the overwhelming thing that I've heard. And actually that's a little bit about what we'll talk about today. So, and a little bit, we'll talk about my history, what's brought me here today, but kind of as a brief overview. Hi there. My career path has been in the nonprofit world, but also in education and making sure that youth have what they need so that they can thrive and succeed in a lifelong, pursuit of happiness and well-being, but also productive living. And that's kind of the perspective that I've brought to Character Counts as we try and take a real critical look at where do we fit in a child's life, but also where do we fit in our community? Because you're absolutely right that this is a unprecedented time. It's kind of a crazy time. I think that all of us probably can look back at the last several months and say, ooh, there was a moment that I acted outside of my integrity and my character because I was mad that there was no toilet paper at the grocery store, or whatever it might be. I think that when we're stressed, there's real triggers that can kind of cause us to act outside of ourselves. So it's a really timely topic in my eyes. But I want to share, and I'm hopeful that this works. So I have a techie husband who helped me look at these things up. But can you see a picture?
Yes.
Right here.
Oh my gosh. I want to know how you did that.
We can connect after this. So
that sounds good.
This is my middle child. He is 6 years old. It was taken a few weeks ago. And, I'm a bit of a storyteller, and I want to connect with you all about my why. Why do I care? He is on the autism spectrum, and for about 4.5 years of his life, he was nonverbal. He wouldn't look at us in the eye for the most part. I mean, he was really just kind of stuck inside of himself. And that's a common story. Right around 4.5, we found, we had been working with speech therapists and, occupational therapists and all the people that have really dedicated their lives to kids like mine, and had never really found the silver bullet. But then one day we found art therapy. And, the topic of this conversation is how creativity and character both kind of equalize for children, right? And for all of us. And for this kiddo who was really kind of stuck inside himself, within 6 months, he was creating art that really spoke to us and to himself. And it was kind of his pathway into self-advocacy, you know, and kind of building a bridge out into this world around him. So he did this when he was just shy of 5. And he was so proud of himself, and he started talking, you know, not necessarily with this, right? But this was kind of his pathway to a vocabulary. And now if you were to meet him in a classroom or on the playground or, you know, in the grocery store, back when we would, you know, socialize at the grocery store, you wouldn't necessarily even know that he wasn't like every other typical child. And I think that in hindsight, we see some truths, us as parents, but also me as a professional. Creativity, I mean, this is a cave painting from Neanderthal times, right? Creativity really predates humanity, right? This impulse to create, the impulse for art is so core to who we are, how we relate to others, how we know ourselves. It's so integral. And that's something I've taken the last several years of my life to look at, is when we're looking at what makes a difference for people in general, but for young people specifically, what makes a difference, what's accessible to the majority, the most number of kids. What we have found are a couple of things. One, that creativity is accessible. Delving into yourself and innovating and coming up with ideas is accessible to you, no matter how old you are, no matter what your socioeconomic background is, no matter what your culture or ethnicity is. Creativity is within you, and nobody needs to form a barrier between you and creativity. Nobody needs to facilitate that in you. The other thing, and I'm kind of a data nerd, so when we look at the educational research, what's making a difference for kids, we see that, yes, obviously, the traditional subjects that they learn in school are meaningful and impactful and preparing them for a productive life. But when there are barriers, when there's the achievement gap for kids that have, you know, systemic barriers, you know, their socioeconomic status or their ethnicity, in general, their achievement and opportunity gaps, the thing that bridges that, one thing that bridges that is character. So I thought we could kind of delve into those two things and show how they're both bridges to equality for kids. So I see some nodding. I want to tell you a little bit about a school that I worked on behalf of in Utah. So I moved here to the shore about 2 years ago, and I was out there in Utah. My husband was in the legislature out there, and I was doing resource development for high poverty Title I schools with really just a lot of diversity. So in this one school that I'll be talking about today, there's about 1,000 kids in the K through 5 school, and 32 first languages. So the kids that were coming to the school, they were coming from homes that had 32 different languages. So Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, I mean, from all over the globe. And with that, they were a school who were not performing on standardized tests for a lot of different reasons, but certainly the language barrier was a key issue. So what we did, which I've really, really loved to kind of be a part of, I'm really proud to have been a part of, is we established a coalition of parents and educators to allocate some resources that, some funds that were raised, and we created an arts and creativity lab, and used that as a way to engage the students in a new way of being a kid and being, you know, learning in a K through 5 environment. And so in this picture, we had them, we gave them the prompt of, you need to get a marshmallow from here to 20 feet from here. Here's a room full of supplies in the STEAM lab, go. And these gentlemen, but also 600 students at this school, built solutions to do that. And they came up with a catapult, And we ended up taking them to the University of Utah's engineering competition, and they won it.
Wow.
Which was significant because they were coming from a school that was, like I said, high poverty, really diverse, and were really performing in a sea of not that, right, of private school kids and schools from the wealthier areas. So for them to come and win it gave them a particular sense of pride, but it also underscored some real key learnings about creativity and how it engages the kids. But that was only one part of the strategy. The creativity and that part of the innovation for these kids learning didn't just stay in the STEAM lab, it also embedded into their classrooms. So we had them doing expressive dance, learning how molecules bounce off of one another in a science, in a science lesson. We had an embedded theater program. And what we ended up finding was that kids were happier. And, how do you measure happiness? Well, they were going to the office less. They were fighting less. The absenteeism was going down. They were engaged in their lessons. They were asking more questions. They were doing their homework at higher rates. And this is a school where homework was optional. So for them to do homework was pretty amazing. They also, in the 1 year after we established this STEAM lab, just shy of 1,000 students logged 2 million minutes of independent, unassigned reading. So I think that for me, that signals engagement. And obviously that all really led to academic achievement, but in a really tangible way. Their standardized testing scores went up, not in art, right? They don't standardize tests for art these days, but their English language arts increased dramatically. Their science scores increased dramatically. Their math scores increased dramatically. And that was something that gave us, the real wins, but also gave us an idea of how can we reframe education for kids, and what role can creativity play in equally leveling the playing field and equalizing things, so that if for whatever reason you as a 5-year-old approach school and aren't finding those things, aren't finding happiness, aren't finding engagement, creativity can be a bridge, an on-ramp to that for you, and can create a lifelong love of learning. I think perhaps the most notable thing was this school that had an F grade at the beginning of it, within one academic year, went from an F to a C. And that was wholly based on standardized test scores. So I know I'm throwing kind of like a lot of data and such, but just kind of to underscore a point that this is an intervention that, I think sometimes when we think creativity and art, and engaging kids in things that aren't, math, science, reading, can feel maybe floofy, right? Not very rigorous. But what happens is there's a real, very tangible and impactful downhill effect that is incredibly meaningful and impactful. And, at this point we have to say, so, okay, I'm the character champion. What does this have to do with character? Well, when we got looking at the data in that one school and then also in that school district around creativity, we started looking nationally at what other interventions have similar outcomes. And the only one thing we could find that equally served the same kind of results for all demographics of children. So regardless of socioeconomic status, ethnicity, culture, immigration status, the only one other thing that we could find is character education. And I know that, so we've got some character coaches on here, and I'm sure lots of you are familiar with it. For us, we talk about responsibility, respect, trustworthiness, good citizenship. I'm failing the test. Sometimes when I start fairness and caring, oh gosh, guys, I gotta have a cup of coffee. So for us, those are things that we have traditionally looked at as a building of morality, of a kind of an infusing of our young people. But what we're really trying to do in some kind of ifs were to make is to boil that down and really infuse what we do with our 6 pillars with it being informed by the research in the education sphere. And there, what the research shows is that there are 4 real domains that make a huge difference for young people. And this is all character education, right? We're talking, oh, is it backwards? No? Okay, it looks backwards for me. So grit, so things like perseverance, honesty, integrity. Social emotional learning is what that SEL stands for. So caring, kindness, empathy, compassion. These are all character strengths, and they all fit really nicely with the 6 pillars of character. It's just a different vocabulary. Growth mindset. So the real crux of growth mindset is the evidence-based belief. I mean, this has been borne out totally objectively and empirically in educational research, is that IQ, so intelligence and character, are malleable. So you're not born into a specific intellectual capacity, and you're not born into a predetermined set of, honesty or integrity, which may sound funny. Who would think that you have set character? But that really has been a prevailing thought for most of the, human history. And growth mindset, when kids know, when teachers and people in their lives, the adults in their lives, are saying, you can, with effort, increase your intellect, you can, with effort, become a better person. Research shows that kids take that and they run with it, and it really levels up their ability to, create futures and create success for themselves. And that goes hand in hand with executive function. So executive function is really about, how are you self-regulating? Are you blowing up on people? Are you, is your anger out of control? Are you able to set a goal and persist towards it? So again, this is kind of the academic language, but what we do with character is really evidence informed and makes a big difference for kids. But not only that, we know when we're in the classrooms, when a character coach is in the classroom, they look at a kid and they can see the light in their eyes. And it doesn't matter if they're black, brown, white, they see the light in that kid's eyes. And that's part of the value that we offer, because schools today are wonderful and they're trying as hard as they can, but they are highly regulated and they're teaching to tests most of the times, right? And I don't mean to pigeonhole them, but that's kind of the reality of education in America today. That's not a reflection on any one school system. And so what we can offer when we do character education is one-on-one connection, because that's the single most important thing in a kid's life. But also, we're shifting the trajectory of their future, no matter what their starting point is. And what do I mean when we're shifting the trajectory of futures? There are so many articles, and I know you can't read this, but I just brought it up so that I wouldn't forget. There are so many articles out there, and this one's from Forbes, that says that what employers care most about is character, right? They care about, and in the business world, they call character soft skills, right? So this article from Forbes, they surveyed the HRSA, the Human Relations Society of America, and 40% of them said the absolute most important thing that employee needs when they're recruiting is character. The absolute most important thing that they look for is character. And that's borne out. And so I think, the thing that I want to underscore is that character pays dividends for our economy as well. So that's, I know I've kind of been like a fire hydrant. You must feel like you're drinking from a hose, but I'm very passionate. I feel really strongly about what makes a difference for young people's futures. And that's kind of my spiel.
Lauren, the thing that you said that struck me first was the fact that, IQ and character can change over time. Because I think a lot of people think like, you have these set traits and that, there's not a way to learn to be more patient or less angry or more, more honest. People think you're either honest or you're not honest, but it's really interesting to think about those as maybe all of them being on a continuum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a graph, this psychological, positive psychology researcher, his name is Martin Seligman. Mm-hmm. He has determined, or I don't know what the verb is, but he's put forth that there are, in a person's life, in a young person's life, and in a person of any age, if you think of a pie chart, 50% of your life and what's going for you is predetermined. It's your genetics, it's your life circumstances. 10% is other things outside of your control, like where you live and all of that. But 40% is malleable. 40% is a lot of percent. And if we are teaching our kids that they get to control the 40%, it really makes a difference for kids. And I think that kids really respond to that. That's a hopeful thing for them.
Nancy, in your experience in working with kids, have you seen changes, as you work with the kids and talk about some of these pillars?
Oh, absolutely. And excuse me, I have a master's degree in social work, and I worked with delinquent kids for a whole lot of my life. And so I kind of like bad kids. And I'm very careful when I'm in a classroom, you know who the kid is that's having behavioral issues. And I always try to make sure that they get to help me to give them some self-esteem. But no, I found, because a lot of the things I do each year. Like one of the things is compliment, don't criticize. And so every morning when I start, a child can give a pencil to someone that they want to give a compliment to for being a person of good character. And it just makes kids think about good character. And another thing I do is there is a good character child of the week, and they get to ring the Buddhist bells, which I do at the end to kind of calm kids down. But one of the things that when you talk about employment, when I was an employer, I was amazed that college kids couldn't make eye contact and do a firm handshake when they were meeting with me. And it's like, how can this be? So all of my kids know, all the character counts kids know how to make eye contact, smile, and shake hands with a firm hand. And if I see them in the community, they know immediately they're supposed to, do the eye contact, the smile, and the handshake, which I think is so important in such a little way, but so important as far as getting jobs and things like that. So no, I've had a lot of fun seeing kids, within a year get older and more mature, and they get the plan of how to do it. So yes, it's been lovely.
It actually reminds me of a question. What grades are kind of targeted with character counts? Are there certain times in elementary, middle, and high school that you've found, because maybe you can't do all the grades, that it's more effective, or just works to do some certain grades?
So we do pre-K through grade 12, but we differentiate it. We change it per kind of student population. I would say that our coaches report to us that they experience the most engagement and most kind of fruitful, I can see this working in real time experience with the elementary grades. And I think that makes sense, knowing what we know about adolescents and teenagers, right? So what we do is, for the older grades, we engage the high school level kiddo, well, I guess not kids, I'm getting older, but we engage the high school level students to kind of train them up, be leaders, and let them be coaches for their younger peers in the adolescent age group. And so that's kind of another layer of embodying character, because it's not just you kind of receiving, children aren't just to receive the knowledge, but really enacting it and putting But also creating positive peer-to-peer relationships is so important, because I think we all know bullying and negative peer pressures can be so damaging and so kind of swaying in these really influential years of their lives. So I would say that that's probably a less robust part of our program, because really most of our coaches go to the elementary age. But we do still have some adult coaches that go to the high school and middle school level, and then also that high school program.
Thanks.
I'm fascinated by all this. I spent many years working with music, and I worked with a band that played music for kids and families, and we didn't call it character education at that time, but it's really what we were doing. And we had a nonprofit that kind of had that built into the mission statement. And so I'm nodding my head a lot, because I'm hearing a lot of the kind of things that we used to do, where, you know, the creative work and the arts education really support and enhance the academics, and that connection and that ability for kids to come out of their shell and outside of the academic, you know, the strict sort of reading, writing, and math arenas, really opening up a door so that they are able to form those relationships in a sphere that's not so prescribed, and that is so valuable to them, and having the older kids and the younger kids work together instead of keeping them completely segregated. I know when we used to go and do concerts in elementary schools all the time, and inevitably the principal, or else often the PTA president who had kind of organized the event, would say, okay, well, we've got the kindergartners at 10, and then we've got the third graders and we would say, no. You have to have the kindergartners with the 8th graders, right. And then, you know, the younger, you know, so that, because that gives the older kids also permission to, in that context, to be silly, sing along, do the hand motions, but in a broader context, to be more vulnerable, you know, because they're in the position of guiding somebody, and so they're doing it not as self-consciously, which for adolescents is so hard. So I love hearing all of this, and I was curious about where you find kind of the places where in this school environment, which has become so much more testing oriented and has really, in my opinion, sort of, we've lost that understanding of what the arts can do for the brain. Where are you finding ways within that context to open up opportunities to bring that in, even within the strictures of the testing environment?
Well, you hit the nail on the head that it's, you know, one of the things that when we sit down and chat with our new character coaches, we talk a lot about respecting the time, because really each minute of a school day is accounted for, right, and planned. And we're just very grateful that we have our school partners that are letting us have any time, right? But I think it can't just happen within school walls. And we've been having a lot of conversations about kind of internally and also with our communities that we serve. How do we bring character to the forefront for all of us? Because, you know, again, character is not a youth issue, right? It's an everyone issue. And also, I think, you know, as we've talked about this innate, you know, at the beginning of what I was sharing, this innate desire to create, I think building character is a really generative act, right? It's a creative act. And that's why it's so important that we believe we can become better people, because then we can engage our creativity in becoming a better version of ourselves. And so with that, I think that, you know, we've had a lot of fun talking to other agencies, and the Midshore is so rich with nonprofit agencies that have their own niche. But there's really, in my view, very little that character doesn't touch. So we have a lot of opportunity engage the community as a whole, to engage families. I think that that's a real strategy. I mean, families are where so much of youth becoming people happens. And so there's a lot of positive things that we can do. And we were kind of on that trajectory with our strategic plan and then COVID, right? So now the question is, how do we kind of remain nimble and start figuring out what does the pathway look like in a pandemic or post-pandemic environment. But I don't know. I think sometimes we put too much on schools, right? When I was in the school systems in Utah, what I was hearing from teachers was, I'm no longer just the educator. I'm the educator. I'm teaching them manners. I'm teaching them how to tie their shoes, and that's not to say anything to parents, right? It's just, we are where we are, and where can we draw some boundaries? And one of the things we can do is say, for us, character extends beyond the school walls. Let's get creative, and figure out who else cares about tying it into how they administer what it is that they do.
Have you found that the pandemic has in some ways opened that up? I think here in Kent County, and I'm not directly involved with the schools here, but I do think that, where pre-pandemic, there were pretty firm boundaries. Like, you couldn't come into the school and just say, I want to volunteer to tutor. You had to go through a lot of stuff. And there was, I think, for lots of reasons, it was hard to sort of bridge that gap, I think, between the community and the school. Mm-hmm. And I think here, and we're very small, so it might be part of it. There is a little bit more leeway in this kind of pandemic environment where everyone's trying to make things work, for the community and the school to work a little bit more hand in hand, a little bit less of a wall between them.
Definitely, so what I would say is I feel like we collectively dove into the deep end of nuance, right? So we're revisioning things right now. And I think that extends way beyond my work. I think in a lot of different areas and domains, we're saying, maybe what we had before, we can learn some lessons and incorporate this moving forward. So I am personally, a glass, maybe not optimist, but glass half full, let's make the best of this. And I think that what it has done, what I can speak to for my own relationships with other agencies and kind of community building, what I've been able to observe is we all were kind of shell-shocked for a little while and just saying, gosh, we have to revision how we allocate our time as leaders. And with that, there was an openness to have these kind of dialogues where we weren't all quite so focused on what it is that we do. And regardless of what you're talking about, I think collaboration, whether it's different agencies, whether it's just people getting together and saying, I have an idea, collaboration is a good thing, because human connection is again, I think, an act of creativity, right? There's new things that come up when we connect one-on-one or in groups.
It's so neat to hear you talk like this, because Mariah and I were talking just earlier today about, different things that we're doing new since the pandemic, and then, new ideas we want to try, and ways to reach out to different parts of our community that better fulfills our overall mission. And, we've done some collaborations with some local organizations, but I love the idea of kind of, as you were talking earlier about the one-on-one connection and, melding creativity and character together, and figuring out if the schools have all these things that they have to do now, and everybody's online anyway, but we are nimble enough to have programs that we can do out in the community with other partners, how can we include all of these things to help bridge those gaps for people? And so it's been fun to kind of ruminate on this while you're talking.
Yeah, I mean, what a fabulously open time, to kind of just make vision and create. And you know, have some fun. I mean, it's been very tough, and I don't mean to kind of make light of the certainly it's tragic, but in a tough time, there's always kind of these moments of what's the path forward. At least that's what I'm hanging my hat on. And I can speak to, you know, my family. So my partner and our 3 kids, we're looking at each other and saying, it's actually been kind of, I mean, we definitely could maybe use a little bit more not face-to-face time, because we're in one house all together, and I'm very aware that winter is coming. But at the same time, I feel like I've gotten to observe my kids being themselves more than I ever did when they were in school full time. And so, you know, good, you know, silver lining is on every cloud. Is that what I feel like I'm grasping for that saying, but, and I think that we can bring the spirit of innovation and the spirit of optimism to all of our endeavors. And really our community demands that of us in this kind of trying time.
Yeah, you're echoing a lot of the things that I've been saying, you know, at RiverArts and in life about, there are a lot of silver linings, and it's been really encouraging to me to see the amount of creativity and ingenuity and also generosity that a lot of people and organizations have shown since the pandemic began. And I also completely agree with you that, you know, collaborations and partnerships in the community and among individuals is how we're all going to get through this. I mean, certainly as RiverArts as an organization, you know, and the other nonprofits here locally in Kent County, at least, I don't see that we can all kind of make it through unless we really work together, because it's a really challenging environment. But, you know, it gives you some opportunities that weren't really there before, when you were kind of locked into, here's what we do, here's what you do, here's our schedule. You know, we already know how the next year is going to look. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I agree.
Everyone, I need to leave, but Lauren, thank you so much. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, Nancy.
Nice to have one of the character counts coaches with us for the discussion.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, and I was also thinking, as you were talking about the schools and how they're pivoting, that we know Kent County Schools has reached out to our local artist community, and through the Kent Cultural Alliance asked for local artists to do some videos of their process and, you know, be able to share with the students. So we can't go in, or we can't do a field trip to this place, but we're able to, you know, have these artists share with us. And, you know, I'm sure there will be those kinds of opportunities coming up, but I also look forward to the opportunities that are outside of school, with the library, with, you know, a local business, with other organizations. And you know, I know I went, right before I started working for RiverArts, I went to a meeting with the local management board, and like you said, sometimes we all are just doing our own things and very busy, but you know, it'd be interesting to touch base with them again, and their character counts program, and just some of the other organizations in the community, and see what we can do together to reach out a little bit more and figure out, you know, how that serves the rest of our community and our mission, and also our members that support us and are here, you know, discussing with us, and, you know, enjoy our shows and exhibits, and, you know, how to make those connections between everybody.
Definitely. You know, and I think you hit on something really interesting, which is, I think that, you know, how do we get to the point where we're siloed? And I think part of it's because there isn't a very strong business case for taking the time to collaborate and to connect. But really, and I'm kind of a data nerd, right? But when we talk about just in the education space, research is absolutely undeniable that community partnerships are meaningful for students. They raise academic achievement, which is really, from the educational standpoint, the goal, right? I don't know if that's my goal as a parent, but that's the school's goal, right? But even in member agencies, so a nonprofit that has members, creating interpersonal connection generates value for members, because it's just intangible and hard to pin down, you know. And I think that we're starting to see, I was talking with a leader at a chamber of commerce that's not in this area, but back in Utah, and they said that they have seen more and more of their members talking about how high value their membership is during this time, because what they value most right now is that connect. I think that times of crisis, time shows us time and time again that we turn to each other. And there's a kind of a core truth in that. And so how do we kind of hold on to that as tight as we can as we kind of emerge from this is the task of the day.
Well,
Yeah.
if I may just add a note here of kudos to Mariah and Anne and the leadership of RiverArts. They really set the way of developing creativity through these times. I mean, this very salon is one example of something they've created, and a daily, it's amazing really, a daily newsletter just full of creative directions and ideas. It really is quite astonishing, and hats off to them. But I just wanted to make sure that I wish there were more people here to hear this, but at any rate, thank you to both of you and to all of the leadership.
Well, thank you, Jerry, and thank you so much for being such a faithful salon attendee. I think, you know, it is, and I'm sure Lauren can back this up. You know, it's really, there's a flow to the last 6 months and to whatever's coming ahead of us, I'm sure, you know, where people are sort of, I mean, it's been a roller coaster, right? So people are ready for something at a certain time and then they need something else. And so it's kind of trying to gauge that and stay, if not ahead of it, at least keeping up with it. And I think, you know, our first idea for the salons was to keep it very small so that we could have a real dialogue and back and forth. And then we have had some bigger ones, but one of the things that I didn't anticipate, I didn't even think when we first came up with them, was the idea of recording them and making it so that people could watch later. And there are, I think, a number of people who can't make it at this time, or they just don't feel the need to actually be here, but they email and they say, well, when's that salon going to be up? Or I really wanted to hear this person. So it's a whole other way of reaching people, and it's a less direct connection, but it's still a connection that I guess they're looking for.
And Jerry, it's nice to hear your comments, and we appreciate them so much, because Mariah and I often struggle with, like, when we started doing these things, do people like them? Should we still do them? What are new things we should do? You know, how many new things can we do? And can we do some of the old things, but in a different way, like the pre-pandemic things? And so, you know, we are constantly kind of balancing all those things. And like Mariah and Lauren said, you know, it's a time of reinvention. And so then just trying to try new things that serve everybody. So we love feedback and knowing, yeah, I really like that, or those emails are great, but you know, I could stand with a few less of them, or I really like them all the time. You know, I mean, all of that feedback is really helpful, and you know, lets us know what to do more of, what to do less of, and you know, what kind of classes people like. And yeah, I've heard some people say, oh, I don't want to take any classes on Zoom, I'm just all zoomed out, and other people, you know, can't wait for the next one. So it's really hard to figure, but it helps us to know that, you know, we're trying to meet all the different needs in a little bit different ways.
Yeah, it's I can't even, I don't know how character counts is even, you know, you're not emailing your students every day or anything. And, you know, we have our Kid Spot sort of department, and it's tough to figure out how to maintain that engagement with families and connect in a way that is really meaningful to kids, especially because it's not, you know, they're not going to just get on Zoom and say hello to their friends.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so as someone who has been getting your emails, because my kids have attended or you know, visited Kid Spot, I just want to echo that. I have been totally impressed by the volume of your output. I mean, from very, very early on, and I think that you hit the nail on the head, right? That agility is important, so the willingness to shift, but also anticipation, right? And staying in tune with who it is you serve so that you understand kind of where they're at before maybe even they do in a kind of an explicit way. But what I will share is that I think that we as people who see that vision have a responsibility to kind of help usher others in the community that aren't necessarily taking that perspective so that we can all really thrive. Because a community doesn't thrive when there's a paring down of services, right? We need to maintain services, even if we need to get creative about how it is that we're filling those needs. Our agencies would not exist if there wasn't a need. They just wouldn't, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that question of how to sort of usher people into this new idea that you have and the vision that, you know, is clear in some of our minds, but, you know, maybe it's hard to communicate. I feel as though I could use to improve sometimes in making it so that other people understand what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask, and I know I can look up on the Character Counts website about the 6 pillars, and we'll let you go here in a minute, but I'd like to communicate a little afterwards, because we have KidSpot, and we do engage with kids through after school programs in normal times and camp and other things, because so many of our members who then support that sort of work are adults. I liked what you said earlier about character education and adults and families. And it would be interesting for us to think how we can just share some resources, because, I mean, as an adult myself, I know and when we started talking about there's always room for improvement, you know, there are things that we can do, and what are some, I don't know, exercises, whether they're creative things or just, you know, books and music to listen to, and all sorts of ways that we can help us remember that it's a growth, even if we're adults already. So I look forward
definitely.
to chatting.
Well, why don't we connect on that? Because I think that I have clearly shown that I'm willing to just kind of
It's been great.
So, well, thank you so much. It's been I always love when I can get together with like-minded people.
Yeah. Now, Anne, you and I didn't talk about who was going to close it out, but
do you want to finish, since I came up with my very last minute quote earlier?
Sure thing.
You toast us. We always end with a toast, which Mariah will now make up on the fly.
I will come up with a last minute toast. Unless Julia wants to suggest.
No, I'll take it.
Well, Julia, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm always happy when you are able to join.
Thank you. And these discussions are absolutely fascinating. I'm learning so much. I really am, particularly this program. I've seen some evidence of some sort of teaching of character counts in our grandchildren, but I have no clue it's been developed to this extent. So it's fascinating. And I'd love to know what a character counts coach does. Is that am I extending the conversation?
That's okay.
No, yeah. And so are you in Kent County, Julia?
Yes.
So I want to be very careful not to step on any toes, since we don't serve Kent County. But there is a Kent County character counts. And what I'll do is I'll send the contact information to Anne maybe, and then you can kind of connect. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Julia, perhaps before you got on, we were talking, I found Lauren through an article I read in the Talbot or Chestertown Spy about her work, and didn't realize that, you know, her organization serves 3 counties, but Kent and Queen Anne kind of have their own separate organization that works through our local management board. But it's all part of Character Counts. Mm-hmm. And Mariah and I know Rosemary and other folks with our local management board, and so I'm sure we can make that connection.
Okay.
Absolutely. And our
just want to know more. Yeah.
Yeah. Our after school program, which of course is not running now, but Character Counts was always built in to the program there, so we can also talk about it from that perspective.
Lauren, would it be fair for me to ask, like, is it similar what a Character Counts coach does at probably in every county? Like, could you give Julia, the quick version of this is what the commitment entails?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it may vary just a little, but we have character coaches that come in, and there's a background check, and we train on the 6 pillars of character, and train on kind of classroom management. So how do you get into a classroom with 25 kids and make sure they don't go all crazy? And then once a week throughout the academic year, and this might be where we differ a little bit, typically kind of October to April, but it might be September to May, or it might depend by county. You go in for once a week for 15 to 20 minutes, and teach your assigned classroom. And if you have grandchildren, grandchildren, and you want to request a classroom, that's certainly not unheard of, or a certain grade level. And part of it's creating a trusted adult contact, because that's so important for young people. And so instead of kind of rotating, you stay with a class for the whole year. You get to see them grow. You get to understand their needs. And I've also heard from a lot of our coaches that you get to kind of have a little bit of a partnership with the teacher, and the teacher will often say, we've been struggling lately with whatever, respect. Can we sprinkle some of those into your lessons? But typically it's a pillar of the month. So, October it's different for each program, but October is responsibility, and you have 4 lessons on responsibility. So that's kind of a broad overview, but I'm pretty sure that those are consistent throughout all of the different programs.
Yeah, that does sound familiar.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will close it out now, and thank you all for coming. And I think having heard all of this and been thinking about it for the last hour, what I would like to toast to is agility, because whether we're in a pandemic or not, we all need that. And in this pandemic situation, as we're all re-envisioning what we do and how we do it, and how we enact all those 6 pillars of character, I think agility is key for everybody. So thanks, everybody, and cheers. And I hope we will see you next week.
Thank you again, Lauren.
Thank you. Thanks.
Very nice to meet you, Lauren. I look forward to talking to you again.